Namaste everyone, Nitish here. I hope you are having an amazing day. In today's video, we are going to make pumpkin pie. But before we make it, let's go to the pumpkin patch and pick up some pumpkins. Alright, so we are back now. Let's begin.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is roast this pumpkin to make the pumpkin puree. The kind of pumpkin that I picked up from the farm are the small ones, often labeled as sugar pumpkin or pie pumpkin. They are sweet, their flesh is smooth, they are less watery and quite flavorful. So whenever you leave your house to buy pumpkins for making a stellar pumpkin pie, you know which one to pick. And to cut this pumpkin, we're gonna plunge the knife into the top part of the pumpkin just next to the stem and push it down all the way to the bottom. Then we're gonna rotate it to the other side, plunge the knife again just next to the stem and push it all the way down. Once we reach at the bottom, we are gonna wiggle the knife to cut through it so that it's cut in half but still attached to the stem. Then hold it from the bottom and pull the two halves apart, like so. Then break the stem and that's it. This is the easiest way to cut the pumpkin without hurting yourself. Then using a metal tablespoon, we are gonna scoop the seeds out and some of the stringy flesh that's attached to them and place these pumpkin halves onto a sheet pan, keeping the flesh side down. Then we are gonna put them in the middle rack of the oven, which has been preheated at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and roast for about 50 to 60 minutes. After 55 minutes, they should be done roasting, and to make sure they are cooked through, we are gonna pierce them with the knife. If they can be pierced easily, then they are done, and if not, then roast them for a few more minutes until they can be pierced easily. Then let them cool down for like 15 minutes until they are safe to handle, and then peel the skin off and roughly cut them into medium-sized chunks. Then we're gonna transfer them to a blender jar or a food processor and blend on a high speed until it's all pureed. Once pureed, we are gonna transfer it to a bowl, cover it with a plastic wrap and store it in the refrigerator until ready to use. Next thing we're gonna make is the dough for the pie crust. So in a large mixing bowl, we're gonna add 310 grams all-purpose flour, 15 grams granulated sugar, half a teaspoon salt and 1/8 of a teaspoon baking powder, which is gonna help the pie crust expand a little bit into the pie pan and save it from slipping down while it's baking. Then whisk all of them to combine and add 210 grams cold unsalted butter that I cut into small cubes and stored in the refrigerator to keep them cold. Now we are gonna toss them for a few times so they are nicely coated with the flour, and then continue tossing and breaking those butter cubes in the flour until it looks crumbly, has sand-like texture and those butter cubes are similar to the size of the peas. Now during this process, if you feel that the butter is melting, then I suggest you placing your bowl in the refrigerator for like 10 to 15 minutes to keep the butter cold, and then continue with the mixing again. Cause these tiny butter bits are gonna melt in the oven and make so many steam pockets which will make our pie crust buttery, tender and really flaky. Next we are gonna add 2 tablespoons apple cider vinegar, which is gonna prevent the formation of the gluten in the dough and save our pie crust from becoming leathery and tough. Then using a fork, give it a nice mix to combine. Then gradually add 7 tablespoons or 105 milliliters ice cold water. Cause our main goal here is to keep the dough as cold as possible, and this icy cold water is gonna save those butter bits from warming any further. So add 1 tablespoon at a time, give it a mix and keep adding and mixing until you have added the quantity of the water that I mentioned. And after adding the water, the dough will not come together into a mass and will still look quite crumbly. But you will know the dough is ready when you press this crumbly dough and it clumps together just like this. Now we are gonna knead it very briefly just to bind it all together, dump it onto the work surface, then clump it and shape it into a 5-inch wide disc. Then we are gonna wrap it in a plastic wrap and chill it in the refrigerator for at least 1 hour. Now what this chilling process is gonna do is allow those gluten strands in the flour to relax and help moisture to work throughout the dough, which will make it smooth and easier to roll out and prevent the crust from shrinking too much in the oven. Now while the dough is chilling in the fridge, we are gonna make our own sweetened condensed milk that is going to be added to our pie filling. I know they are easily available in most of the grocery stores, but believe me, it tastes so much better when it's homemade. So in a medium-sized sauce pot, I'm gonna add 1 liter full fat milk, 150 grams granulated sugar and 50 grams packed brown sugar, which usually is not used in making condensed milk, but I'm adding it just to have that rich deep caramel-like flavor in our pie filling. Now we're gonna heat it over a low-medium heat and stir continuously to dissolve the sugar. And once the sugar is dissolved, we are gonna increase the heat to medium to bring it to a simmer and continue cooking it for 25 to 30 minutes. During this time, the milk is gonna get all foamy and start to bubble up, but don't stop there and keep stirring until it's reduced by 60 to 65% and leaves a trail behind when you run your finger at the back of the spoon. Then kill the heat and let it cool down for like 5 minutes and strain it through a fine sieve to get rid of any milk solids. The consistency of this condensed milk right now is not as thick as the commercial one, but it's gonna continue to thicken and reach at the right consistency as it cools down. And once you are done straining, that's it. There you have your own homemade sweetened condensed milk. Now we are gonna cover it with a plastic wrap and refrigerate it until ready to use. And after chilling the dough for 1 hour, we are gonna pull it out of the fridge and let it sit at the counter for like 5 minutes so it's a little easier to roll out. Then we are gonna dust some flour onto the work surface, place the dough disc onto it, then flour the top of the disc, flour the rolling pin, and then roll it into a 13-inch circle. Now as you are rolling the dough, keep moving it and keep dusting some flour as necessary to prevent it from sticking to the work surface. And after rolling, if you see any cracks on the edge of the circle, don't panic and simply pinch and tap those cracks to stick together. Then we are gonna carefully drape it over the rolling pin like so, get rid of the excess flour from the work surface and transfer it onto a 9-inch pie pan like so. Then we are gonna lift the overlapping dough with one hand and push it inwards very gently with the other to fit it nicely into the pan. Then using a pair of scissors, we are gonna cut off the extra dough that is overlapping, leaving half an inch dough beyond the lip of the pie pan. And after cutting, we are gonna fold it under itself to create a rim on the crust and make sure it's nice and secure on the lip of the pie pan. Next, we are going to crimp the rim that we created. So we are gonna place the index finger and the thumb on the outside of the rim and push the inner part of the rim outward with the thumb of the other hand like so. And continue crimping the rim until you have a gorgeous looking pie shell like the one you are looking at right now. Then using a fork, we are gonna dog the bottom of the crust so it doesn't puff up too much while baking and chill it in the freezer for 20 minutes. At this point, we are gonna preheat the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius. And after chilling it for 20 minutes, we are gonna pull it out of the freezer and blind bake this pie crust. Now blind baking is baking an unfilled pie shell partially before we add any wet filling to it, so that our pie crust is cooked all the way through and the pie don't end up being soggy and sad. So to do that, we are gonna crush a parchment paper and push it all the way to the base of the crust to fit it nicely into the pan, and then fill it completely with some dried beans. This added weight is gonna prevent the bottom crust from bubbling up and the sides of the crust from collapsing or sliding down the pie pan during baking. Now we're gonna spread them evenly in the pan, transfer it to a baking sheet, place it in the middle rack of the oven and bake it for 25 minutes. And after 25 minutes, we are gonna remove the beans, put it back in the oven and let it bake on its own for another 20 minutes. And after baking this pie crust for total 45 minutes, it will be set, will look dry and flaky but still pale in color, which is absolutely fine because it's gonna get a really nice dark brown color when we bake it again for the second time with our pie filling. Now we're gonna let this pie crust cool down for a little bit and reduce the temperature of the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit or 160 degrees Celsius. Now while it's cooling down, let's start making our pie filling. So in a large mixing bowl, I'm gonna add 450 grams of our roasted pumpkin puree, 1 whole egg plus 3 egg yolks, 40 grams packed brown sugar, a teaspoon vanilla extract, a teaspoon ground ginger, 1/8 of a teaspoon ground cloves, a teaspoon salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon ground nutmeg, a teaspoon ground cinnamon, and finally 350 milliliters of our own homemade sweetened condensed milk. Then give it all of this to combine together and make sure there is no lumps of spices or sugar hanging in there. Then we are gonna transfer it to a pan and heat it over a very low heat. Heating the pie filling just before baking is gonna help it cook nice and even when we put it in the oven. So we are gonna continue heating while stirring constantly until it's just lukewarm and the temperature reaches around 100 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we are gonna quickly prepare the egg wash by mixing 1 egg and 1 tablespoon heavy cream in a small bowl and brush the inside and the outside of the rim of the crust so it gets that really nice dark brown color when done baking. Then we are gonna pour the pumpkin custard in the pie crust until it's filled about 90% and tap the pan on the work surface for a few times so all those air bubbles that are hiding at the bottom come to the surface. Then pop those air bubbles using a toothpick, smoothen the filling with the spatula, transfer it to a baking sheet, and tin the crust with a long piece of aluminum foil to prevent the crust from excessive browning. Then we are gonna put it in the middle rack of the oven and bake it for anywhere between 60 to 70 minutes or until an instant read thermometer inserted in the center of the pie reads the temperature between 190 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And mine took exactly 65 minutes. Now I'm gonna remove the aluminum foil and let this pie cool down for at least 3 hours, as the center of the pie is still a little jiggly and it's gonna continue to set with its residual heat. And after 3 hours our pie has cooled down. Now just before serving we're gonna make a very simple whipped cream to go on top of the pie. So in a medium sized mixing bowl I'm gonna add 170 milliliters heavy whipping cream, 60 milliliters sour cream and 1 tablespoon powdered sugar. Then I'm gonna whisk on a medium-high speed until it's creamy and reaches to a soft peak consistency. Then I'm gonna cut a slice, top it with some whipping cream, sprinkle some ground cinnamon and eat this thing. This pie is absolutely delicious. The filling is firm and creamy at the same time. The crust is buttery, super flaky and is cooked all the way through, and all the warm spices that we used are surely giving the pie that signature fall flavor. And making it totally from scratch definitely made a huge difference here.
Alright my amazing people, if you are still here, thank you so much for staying with me till the end, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned something from it. And if you did, give this video a like, share it and don't forget to subscribe, because this is the best thing you can do to support this channel. Now it's time for me to go. I will see you guys in the next one. Till then, bye bye.